This morning, a Tufts University graduate student is waking up in a detention facility in Louisiana. She was arrested by federal agents outside an off-campus apartment on Tuesday in Boston, and security video shows the moment that she was taken into custody by federal agents. Her name is Rumeysa Ozturk. She's from Turkey, a Fulbright scholar and a PhD student. Her attorney says she has a valid visa. But the school now says they were told her visa status has been terminated. DHS says she, quote, engaged in activities in support of Hamas, and her attorney calls those claims wild accusations. Last year, she co-authored an op-ed in the school's newspaper criticizing Tufts' response to the pro-Palestinian movement. CNN's John Miller is here with much more on this, and there seems to be much more to learn about this. First, on the arrest, what do you see in that video, John?
Well, the first thing you notice is you've got 6 agents approaching her, and when they make contact with her, they all pull up face masks. That is unusual in American law enforcement when they're acting lawfully and properly. Some tactical teams do it, but this is a routine arrest.
Then also, what are you hearing? I mean, I read one quote that they've not said publicly, DHS, in terms of a spokesperson, given a lot of detail quite yet, just the one that I read there. What are you hearing from Homeland Security officials?
Well, first, they're defending the use of masks by agents making these arrests. They say, when our heroic law enforcement officers conduct operations, they clearly identify themselves as police while wearing masks to protect themselves from being targeted by known and suspected terrorist sympathizers. Now that sounds a little hyperbolic. What they're probably talking about is demonstrators and protesters have had a habit of doxing agents that they could identify, harassing them online or at home. Still, the rub here is these students so far have not been charged with a crime of supporting a terrorist organization. They've been charged with what, for anybody who was not here on a visa, would have been 100% constitutionally protected protest activities. And this is going to be the rub in these discussions, which is when these things get to court, if being here as a student is a privilege, and it is on that visa, do you lose constitutional rights that would be available to anybody else who is here?
Is it clear what is next then in this case?
Well, it's hard to say because the first thing they do is take them into custody. They don't notify them that you have a hearing and we're going to litigate this. The second thing they do is they send them to Louisiana, which puts them far away from their legal representation and makes it hard to stay in touch. So the question is, will they be out of the country or will this get to court first? But we're going to have to watch how this is going to play out because it's going to dictate, how the future is going to go for these other cases.
That's exactly right. John, thanks so much. It's good to see you.
Thanks.
This morning, the Turkish government says it's closely watching the case of Rumeysa Ozturk, a Turkish national and graduate student at Tufts University, who was detained outside her home this week. The Department of Homeland Security says she, quote, engaged in activities in support of Hamas, but has yet to specify what those activities were. Her attorney says she has not been charged with a crime. CNN senior legal analyst and former assistant U.S. Attorney Elie Honig is joining us right now. So, Elie, what law is the Department of Homeland Security relying on in this case?
Well, Wolf, we don't know the answer to that exactly, and here's why. If this was a criminal case, and as you said, it's not, but if it was, there would be a public indictment, and that would tell us exactly what law was at issue here. It would tell us exactly what the alleged who, what, when, where of it was. But instead, we are in the immigration context. Now, it appears, based on DHS's public statements, that they're relying on a 1952 immigration law that gives the Secretary of State very broad discretion to designate a non-citizen, including a visa holder like here, as a potential threat to U.S. national security. They've invoked this law in other similar cases. It has rarely been used over the 70-plus years of its existence, but it looks like under the new Trump administration, DHS is relying on this law more and more frequently.
So, Elie, what legal arguments do you expect Ozturk's lawyer to use to challenge all of this?
So I think we should look for two arguments. The first argument is that the law itself cannot give the Secretary of State unilateral authority to simply declare someone a security threat and deport them. The argument will be that the individual is entitled to some type of due process, some type of way to contest this. I think that's going to be the core argument that we see here from the lawyer for this student.
In the article that she co-authored at the Tufts University student newspaper, she says, among other things, credible accusations against Israel include accounts of deliberate starvation and indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians and plausible genocide. Is that enough for the U.S. government now to say she should be kicked out?
Well, I think that'll raise another legal issue. I think another thing that we'll hear from the student's lawyer is that she's being singled out because of the content of her speech, because of statements like that she has made publicly. And I think the argument will be that that's a First Amendment violation. What I think we'll hear in response from the government, from DHS, is Congress drafted this law, they passed this law in 1952, and they meant to give the Secretary of State very broad discretion. And so the Secretary of State, in the argument of DHS, has the ability to determine that somebody's a national security threat, and that's that, and there's no further proceeding.
We've learned that Ozturk has been transferred to a detention facility in Louisiana, despite a judge issuing an order for Ozturk not to leave the state of Massachusetts, where Tufts University is. Do we know, Elie, when this order was given and whether the Department of Homeland Security may have intentionally defied the judge?
So that's the exact issue here, Wolf. And we saw a similar issue still playing out in the other case involving deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members. The key question here is going to be timing. At the moment that federal judge gave the order, do not remove this person from Massachusetts, had she already been moved to Louisiana, if she had already been moved, then there's not going to be an issue regarding defiance. But if she was moved after that order was given, then we're going to need some serious answers here from DHS as to why that order was not followed.
Elie Honig helping us understand what's going on as usual. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Will.